Okay guys, welcome back to Let's Fly RC. Today I just wanted to give you a quick build video on how to make my LF Tilt. The LF Tilt is my solution to being able to fly fast with my racing quad and not be staring at the ground the whole time. The LF Tilt here allows me to tilt my camera upwards whenever I want to fly fast, and it allows me to tilt it down whenever I want to land. I generally only use this function when I land because it really helps me not to hit myself when I come in for a landing. So let's get started. I'll show you how to put this thing together. This tilt mount is designed for the Fat Shark FPV camera, the 600 TV line Fat Shark FPV camera. It's possible that this might be modifiable for another type of camera setup, but this is strictly designed for the Fat Shark FPV camera. Alright, so the first step would be to take this piece here and this piece here. We want to take these pieces and line them up just like this. Just to check for fit, we're going to put a dab of CA right there and right there, and then we're going to put this piece on, and then we're going to put a little more CA on it as well. Alright. And you want to make sure it faces in the proper direction. And once you have that right, then you can put a little bit of CA. I always like to put a little bit of CA right here as well. And this just helps to add a little bit of strength. I like to put a dab of CA here. Be careful not to hit the holes because you're going to be needing those. So if you want to hit it with some kicker, which is what I like to do, I'm very impatient. That will help to speed up the drying process. Alright, we'll set that aside and work on the next piece. This is very simple. This is sort of like the flight test firewalls that they build. Just want to line these up. You want to put the holes towards the front so the camera doesn't hit the back wall when it tilts. Now on mine, I actually drilled the hole a little bit farther back in order to put the camera a little farther back this way. That helped to protect the camera in a crash, but it also restricts your tilt angle. It doesn't allow you to tilt up as far. So once you get this sort of assembled, it's kind of a juggling act to hold it and glue it together. What I like to do is try to put a dab of glue in the corner after I have it lined up, and then hit it with some kicker, and then follow up along the rest of the way. That way it gives it something to hold on to. And don't glue your fingers. Alright, I'm going to finish up with the rest of the CA here. Along this corner, along this corner, and this corner here. Let it sit there for a minute and wick into the holes, and after you've let it sit for a minute or two, then you can hit it with some kicker again. Alright, so once those are together, you're going to want to mount your Fat Shark camera using the screws that came with your Fat Shark. Now if you're lucky, your Fat Shark came with long enough screws. I had one Fat Shark camera that had short screws and one Fat Shark camera that had long screws. This one actually came with the long screws. If they're not long enough, you'll know right away, and you'll have to find some screws. Now I stole a couple screws out of one of my daughter's toys, which were the same size. These are same size screws as a servo screw, but you needed a little bit longer than a servo screw. So if your Fat Shark camera came with the shorter screws, I recommend going to your hardware store and try to find a screw of the same thread pattern to make it longer, so it'll go through there and actually get up to almost to the front of the camera. That'll lock it in place really nicely. The next step is to take a piece of wire. This wire we're going to use in this video, stock number 504, and this is 0.062 music wire or 1.57 millimeters. We're going to be using that wire, and we're also going to be using the 1 millimeter wire that we normally use for our control rods. That wire goes perfectly through the hole of the servos. We're going to cut this wire about a ½ inch longer than our wooden piece here. And I got these at Harbor Freight. They're awesome wire cutters. On my other build, I think I used 503, which is one size smaller than this, and it fits through these holes perfectly. But you definitely don't want any slop, and this wire is a little bit thicker, so you can still wiggle it back and forth and kind of push it through. And do that from both sides if you need to. If it doesn't go right through, you can always use your razor blade to open up the hole, or a drill bit. But again, you don't want any slop. So once we get that through, and we know that it fits properly, we're going to take it out. We're going to bend a right angle about 1/4 of an inch in. Okay? And then we're going to slide it through. And now this part's tricky because you don't want to stress the wood and damage it, so you kind of have to take a pair of needle nose pliers and another pair of pliers to finish off the bend. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to keep it from coming back out. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect right angle. It can be a little bit off. It just needs to stop it from going off. And you're not going to really have a problem with this falling off. I've got these zip ties from Harbor Freight. Now you can use this exact item number 60257, but the important part is that they're 4-inch zip ties. And you don't really have to use this zip tie. This is just the one that I like to use because I can cinch them down really tight and they fit really well. The first quadcopter I mounted this on, I used double-sided tape, and I did that on the second one as well. Yours may not have a problem, but in the cold climate, it ended up pulling the double-sided tape off of this part here. So what I did was I drilled holes in the bottom of it. I made the holes line up perfectly with the blackout slots in the bottom. So if you want to drill holes, line them up, mark it with a pencil or a razor blade, and drill yourself 4 holes, and that way you can put zip ties down along with the double-sided tape. Alright, so we're going to take 2 zip ties and we're going to put them through this direction. And we're going to put those zip ties underneath our bar, very easy, and start to cinch them in. Don't pull them tight yet, we'll do that in a minute. Let's go ahead and pull these down. We need to pull them as tight as we can to prevent slop from happening, because if you have any slop in this, it will show up in your video and it will rattle around in flight. So we need to pull these as tight as we can get them, and sometimes it's easier if you take a pair of needle nose to push down on the other part and pull it tight, or if you have a zip tie cincher, you can always use that. So now that it's tight, you can see that there's no slop in this at all. Push these guys up against the wood. So that way you have full deflection for your FPV camera. Cut your zip ties off. So the next step is to take some double-sided tape and put it on the bottom. Now I like this double-sided tape. This 3M double-sided tape I got from Home Depot is the best double-sided tape I've ever had. So go ahead and put a piece on the bottom. And on my setup, I put a piece on the back here, and then I double-sided taped the servo to the back of it, and then I put a piece of double-sided tape on the bottom of the servo as well, and then the whole thing went down as one assembly. And you can see that here. And it all fits within inside the blackout quad, no problem. The second gauge wire that I use is the 1mm, and cut off about 1 inch worth, maybe 1.5 inches, just enough to go between your servo and your camera mount. Now when you do this, again, like I said, it's really important that you don't have any slop. So your first bend is just going to be a standard right angle. Then your second bend is another right angle the opposite direction, just like a regular old Z-bend. But when you go to bend it, I used a pair of wire cutters. Now you don't squeeze real hard on these wire cutters because you'll cut the wire, but if you squeeze them and then bend it, you can get yourself a nice tight Z-bend that's really small, and it doesn't span the entire width of a pair of needle nose pliers, because again, we're going through a very thin piece of wood and we're going through a very thin servo arm, so it needs to be really thin in between there to keep the slop from happening. And then on the other side, once you get your distance worked out, you're going to cut a modified Z-bend, and that's where you bend it 90 degrees. Again, take in our other tool here, and then you go the opposite direction. So when you're all finished, you'll have this design here. You'll have a regular Z-bend here, and you'll have your modified Z-bend here. And your modified Z-bend will point down if you did it properly. So with all that said, if you look at this camera has absolutely zero slop in the wire itself. When I pull on the camera, I'm pulling on the servo at the same time. So because of that, my camera doesn't vibrate at all. It's nice and solid. I double-sided taped it down, and again I used the zip ties like I said a minute ago. You can see the holes. You can see where I drilled the zip ties in right there. Now I used bigger zip ties on the bottom. You can use whatever size zip ties you want. That just happened to be what I had. I use this on a flip 1.5 board. I soldered my Lemon receiver right to my flip board, as you can see that there. So I had to actually solder on my servo leads to channel 6 because of the way that I did it. You probably won't have this problem, but you need to definitely find a channel for your servo to plug into and get that set up on a switch or a slider. I've got mine set up on a slider, but I only use full up and full down on my slider. Flying and landing is all I use it for. Thanks again, guys, for watching Let's Fly RC. These kits are available now on eBay, and I'll provide a link in the description of this video.